We welcome you back to this channel. In this video, we explore inhabitants of haunted houses. Some houses may seem empty, but they aren't. We'll hear the stories of those who discovered they weren't alone within those walls. Go ahead, turn off the lights, and let's take one more step into the world of the unknown.
The invisible tenant.
My friend Charlie and I had decided to move in together. We both wanted to be independent, and after talking about it for a while, we finally did it. We found an old, spacious house on the outskirts of the city. It was perfect for what we needed and, best of all, very cheap. It was an old house with creaky wooden floors and a damp smell that never went away, but there was something about it that we loved. We moved in quickly, excited to start a new chapter. The first night was quiet, although neither of us could sleep well. We heard noises that we attributed to the house settling, dull thuds in the walls, creaks in the ceiling, and what sounded like footsteps dragging in the hallways. It wasn't the most comfortable, but we accepted it as part of the package. However, things started to get worse. The problems began one night when we were watching a movie in the living room. It was a calm night, with a light drizzle tapping on the windows. Suddenly, the sound of a door slowly opening interrupted us. At first, we thought it was the wind, but we decided to check it out. We got to the basement door and it was slightly ajar. We looked at each other, puzzled. Neither of us had been down there since we moved in. Without thinking much of it, we closed it, making sure to lock it. The next day, I found Charlie standing in front of the basement door, looking very pale. He told me that during the night, he had heard whispers coming from below but didn't think much of it. However, at dawn, he went down to check and found the door open again, but the key was still in the lock. We closed it forcefully again and tried not to think about it. One early morning, I woke up abruptly, feeling a presence in my room. I opened my eyes and saw a dark figure. It didn't have a defined shape. It seemed to be wearing some kind of robe over a thin, small body. It was standing next to my bed, so still that at first I thought it was my imagination. But then, I saw it move slowly, almost floating, disappearing through the door. I ran to Charlie's room and told him what I had seen. He wasn't surprised because he had also had an encounter. He told me that the night before, a figure just like the one I had seen was watching him from the hallway, but had disappeared almost instantly. We started noticing other things. Objects moved out of place, shadows sliding across the walls, and whispers calling our names from empty rooms. Charlie found scratch marks on his bedroom door, as if something had tried to get in. I started dreaming of a woman with long, dark hair and no face, who would come close to me and murmur things I couldn't understand. The climax came one night, when the noises in the basement became deafening. Thuds, dragging sounds, and a low moan that seemed to come from everywhere. We decided to confront whatever was down there and went down together, carrying a flashlight and a stick. It was our first time down there. The basement was cold and damp, with walls covered in mold stains. The flashlight flickered, and when we pointed it at the darkest corner, we saw something we were not meant to see. A crouched figure with pale skin and sunken eyes, watching us from the shadows. It let out a high-pitched scream and rushed toward us. We ran out without looking back. We slammed the door shut and blocked it with every piece of furniture we could find. That night, we didn't sleep. We didn't know what to do. We just sat in the living room trembling, with the feeling that whatever it was just on the other side of the door, waiting. The next day, we decided that we couldn't stay there anymore. We left the house without looking back, leaving our belongings and everything we had behind. All we wanted was to leave that place and what we saw there. We didn't say anything to the landlord. We just left. We never spoke about what happened again, but even now, sometimes, in the silent nights, I can still feel the cold presence and hear the echo of that high-pitched scream. And I wonder if we really managed to escape when we left that place.
Footsteps in the hallway.
I moved into that apartment looking for a fresh start. I had lived alone before, but I was new to this city. It was a small, somewhat old place, with walls that seemed to have heard too many stories. Despite how strange it felt, it was perfect for me. From the first day, I sensed something odd, a feeling of being watched, but I chalked it up to the nerves of living alone. It was on the third night that things began to change. I heard light footsteps in the hallway, as if someone small were running. I checked the entire place, but there was no one. I thought maybe the sound was coming from the apartment next door, although at that hour, no one should have been awake. The next day, I found one of my dining chairs in the middle of the hallway. I didn't think much of it, assuming I had moved it and forgotten to put it back. However, it happened again that night. This time, along with the footsteps, I heard a faint whisper, like a stifled giggle. I quickly turned on the lights, but everything was silent and in order. I stood in the middle of the hallway, trying to control the fear that was starting to grow inside me. I knew something was wrong, but I forced myself to think it was just my mind playing tricks due to the solitude. On the third night, I woke up suddenly, feeling as if someone was in my room. I looked toward the door and saw a small figure moving slowly toward the hallway. It was a girl, wearing a dirty white dress, her hair covering her face. I felt a paralyzing panic, but when I dared to get up and follow her, she was already gone. I checked every corner of the apartment, but there was no sign of her. That night, I slept with the light on, wondering if I had imagined the whole thing. Things intensified after that. I started finding old toys that weren't mine. A broken rag doll appeared on my bed, a rusty toy car in the kitchen, and every time I tried to get rid of them, they reappeared in different places. I was scared to be alone in the apartment, but I had nowhere else to go. I tried to ignore what was happening, convincing myself that there had to be a logical explanation. But I couldn't ignore the noises. Those small footsteps became clearer, more insistent, and the childish giggles turned into faint wails that echoed throughout the apartment. One night, as I tried to fall asleep, I heard the sound of the bathroom door slowly creaking open. I stayed still, pretending to be asleep, but I felt a presence next to my bed. I opened my eyes slightly, and there she was, the little girl. This time, her face peeked out from behind her dirty hair, showing dark, emotionless eyes. She just stared at me, unmoving. I wanted to scream, but no sound came out of my throat. I squeezed my eyes shut, hoping she would disappear, and when I opened them again, she was gone. The next morning, I spoke to the neighbor downstairs, an older woman who had lived there for decades. She told me that many years ago, a little girl named Camilla had died in that apartment. No one knew how, but since then, the place had been rumored to be haunted. Many people had moved in afterward, and none stayed for very long. I felt a chill run down my spine when I heard her name. Everything made sense, but even so, I didn't want to let fear win. I couldn't afford to move again, and I kept telling myself it was something I could handle. That night, the footsteps were louder, like someone was running back and forth, banging against the walls. I closed my bedroom door, but the noises didn't stop. I could feel her presence getting closer and closer. Through the door, I heard her giggle turn into a heart-wrenching sob. I sat on the bed, my hands shaking, too afraid to go out. I knew she was there, that she wasn't going to leave, and that I had made the choice to stay with her. I still hear those footsteps every night. Sometimes they're soft. Other times they seem like they're about to cross my bedroom door. I try to ignore them, but I know she's still here, and she has no intention of leaving.
We are not alone.
We moved into that house a few months ago. It was an old house, the kind with high ceilings, creaking wood, and an air that made you feel like you were in another era. My parents were excited. They said that with a little work, it would be our perfect home. I wasn't so sure, but I had no choice. As soon as we arrived, something felt off. There was a musty smell, a sense of confinement, and the constant feeling that someone was watching us. I chalked it up to nerves about the move. But soon, everything became much stranger. The first few weeks, everything seemed normal. We occasionally heard noises, but we attributed them to the house's age. However, things started to change. One night, while trying to sleep, I heard a whisper. I thought it was my mom, but when I looked into the hallway, no one was there. The house was shrouded in thick darkness, as if the light was being swallowed up in every corner. The next morning, my mom complained that she had found the dishes outside the cabinet, shattered on the floor, as if someone had thrown them forcefully. My dad, always skeptical, said it must have been vibrations from nearby traffic, but we were too far from the road for that to make sense. Shortly after, the paranormal events began to intensify. The lights flickered for no reason, objects moved around, and there were loud thumps, always at the same time, 3:15 in the morning. One night, while we were having dinner, we all heard a creak in the ceiling, like someone dragging their feet. My dad went up to check but found nothing, and when he came back down, he was pale and wouldn't talk about it. We started sleeping with the doors locked and the lights on, though it didn't make us feel any safer. The worst happened one early morning. I woke up feeling a weight on my chest, like someone was sitting on me. I opened my eyes and saw a tall, thin, dark shadow in the corner of my room. It had no face, but its eyes were two black spots, as if they absorbed the little light coming through the window. It didn't move. It was just there, staring at me. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. When I finally managed to turn on the lamp, the shadow was gone, but the air felt icy, and I could see my breath forming in the room. My mother also began having strange experiences. She said she heard voices calling her from the basement, insistent whispers that seemed to be asking her to go down. One afternoon, I found her standing in front of the basement door, her hand on the knob as if hypnotized. I had to shout at her to make her react, and when she finally did, she told me something that sent chills down my spine. She said that on more than one occasion, she had seen a tall, dark, strange figure in different parts of the house. But this time she followed it and saw it pass through the basement door. For some reason, she felt the urge to follow it. That same night, things got out of control. While we were in the living room, the lights began flickering violently. The TV turned on by itself, showing distorted static, and we heard a loud bang coming from the basement, as if something had been thrown with force. After that night, my dad finally admitted that something was wrong. He contacted a man who, according to rumors, knew how to deal with things like this. An exorcist, though he didn't call himself that. He said he was an energy cleaner. When he arrived, he looked so out of place in our house with his robe and a bag full of herbs and strange jars. He walked through the house in silence, muttering words in a language we didn't understand. When he reached the basement, his expression changed. He said that was where the root of it all was, something very dark and ancient. The ritual began with a strong smell of incense. The air grew heavy, and at times it felt like daylight couldn't penetrate the windows. As he prayed and sprinkled holy water, we heard screams, as if the house itself was protesting. The walls vibrated, and the floor trembled. Suddenly, an invisible force threw the man against the wall, and all the objects in the room started flying around. It was chaos. We tried to help him, but something kept us paralyzed, as if a presence was pressing down on us. The man continued, despite the evident pain, and after what felt like hours, everything calmed down. The silence that followed was deafening. The exorcist warned us that although the entity had been weakened, it wasn't gone completely. He advised us to leave the house, but my parents insisted on staying. From that day on, things quieted down, but it never felt like home again. We moved out a year later, but even now, when I close my eyes, I can still see those black eyes staring at me from the corner of my bedroom.
Thank you for journeying with us through the dark passages of these stories. If you enjoyed them, give us a like, share, and subscribe so you don't miss more tales of terror. Until next time, where fear will once again be your companion.